Well, welcome to the first session of Listening for Spirit in Wilderness Times. My name is Kay Lindahl, and for the next 5 weeks, I will be your guide as we explore what that looks like in our journey through Lent together. We might consider these sessions an aspect of pilgrimage as we discover new ways to think about listening and practices that will nourish us along the way. These sessions are being offered in Spanish language as well. So those of you who have it's the interpretation button down at the bottom, and you just need to click on that and click to Spanish if you want to hear the interpretation in Spanish. We will begin each session with 2 brief rituals as we move from whatever you were doing before you logged in to the sacred space of this pilgrimage time. And the first ritual is to light a candle. Those of you who know me know I always like to light candles. And this is to remind us that the light of spirit is always in us and within us. Here I am lighting my candle. If you have a candle nearby that you would like to light, that would be wonderful as well. So we can all have our candles as part of our ritual time together. And there's a wonderful quote from the Brothers of Taizé that says, "This symbol reminds us that even when the night is very dark, whether in our own life or in the life of humanity, God's love is a fire that never goes out." Our second ritual is to experience a minute of silence together, to become more connected, to be present as we breathe with each other. So I invite you to find a comfortable position. You might want to close your eyes or lower your eyelids, and you'll hear a gong at the beginning and at the end of this time. So I invite you to just take a deep breath, relax, and open your heart to breathing together for this time. Thank you. I don't know about you, but in that brief time of stillness, it opened up my heart space, and I could feel us getting connected through the technology of Zoom. But today we'll be looking at a new frame about the way we think about listening to form a context for our journey for this pilgrimage. And I'll start with some general information about listening, and followed by introducing 3 concepts that are sort of undergird the value and the importance of listening. And these concepts are that listening is an art, and listening is a choice, and listening is a gift. In sessions 2, 3, and 4, we will explore the practices of silence, reflection, and presence, all of which support us in becoming a listening presence. And then our final session will include practical tips for daily use, some resources, and visioning for how to take this work forward into our beloved community. My intention for these sessions are that even though we are on Zoom, we can interact with each other. So I invite you to use the chat if you have questions or comments throughout my presentation. And I'll stop every so often and respond to those comments. There'll also be time for conversation in breakout rooms. We'll be doing that later on. And then again, we'll have some time to have an open conversation towards the end of our session together. Handouts summarizing what we cover each week, as well as some new practices to try and reflections for you to ponder during the week, will be in your inbox by the time we finish today. That's the plan anyway. So look for those. And in addition, each session is being recorded and a link will be available tomorrow. It will go out probably with the daily quote that from the church. So all of this is to say and invite you to use this time when we're together on these Zoom calls to practice listening, to be present. There's no need to take notes because you will get the quotes, you will get all the general summary of the topics we covered tonight. And so the whole idea is that we will be practicing listening throughout this whole series and everything that we do. So are there any questions before we begin with the background information? Anything anybody needs to say or wants to say? Okay, so for the background information, for the past 24 years, listening has been the focus of my attention and my passion. And something very interesting happens when people find out that I do this kind of work and they say to me, oh, that's wonderful. We could all learn how to listen better. Followed almost immediately by, would you talk to my husband, my wife, my sister, my brother, my boss, my kids, any number of people. And it's like almost followed it. And I say, that seems like each one of us has at least one person that we wish would listen to us better. So if that's really true, that none of us feel that other people listen to us, what we're really saying perhaps is that no one is listening well, including ourselves. So in that case, each of us really does need to learn how to listen better. There's almost like a yearning to be heard. Somehow we all know that we should be listening. When asked the question, are you listening? Our answer is usually yes, even though we might just be hearing sounds, words. Many times we think that if we're not speaking, we must be listening. A better question might be, are you really listening? Meaning, are you really paying attention to what I'm saying? Or are you listening to the conversation in your head? So what if we treated listening as an art? What if we paid as much attention to listening as we do to speaking? If we really think of communication, that in the components of communication, speaking and listening are the two main components. And speaking is the one most people think of as the most powerful role. It certainly gets the most attention and is most valued. My experience is that the role of listening is even more powerful, although seldom recognized or understood. For example, we often hear someone comment, wow, that was a really powerful speech, or I loved what you just said. I seldom hear anybody said, goodness, that was such a powerful way that you listened. Or did you notice the listening in the room today? And yet it's the quality of our listening that can make a profound difference in any conversation. As Quaker author Douglas Steere puts it, to listen another soul into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be almost the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. That's a pretty profound statement. It's not what we say, It's the quality of how we listen that can make a difference in any conversation. And as a way to anchor this idea for us, I invite each of you right now to think of a person or a group of people or a situation in your life that you most want to impact with the quality of your listening. It's kind of a different question to ask. We don't usually think about it that way. We usually think, well, what can I say that will make a difference? I'm inviting you today to think about what is the situation and how can I listen that will make a difference? Once you have that person or those persons or that situation in mind, just keep it in the back of your head during these sessions, because my sense is by the end of this series, you'll notice that something has shifted in your listening that transforms all of your interactions, and especially this one that you have just identified. Research on listening also confirms that we need to pay more attention to listening. We spend about 80% of our waking hours in communication of one sort or another. Writing is 9%, reading is 16%. We speak about 25 to 30%, and about 45 to 50% of our day is engaged in listening or to music or to TV or radio. About 75% of that time, however, we are forgetful, preoccupied, or not paying attention. One of these factors that influences this statistic is the attention span of an adult in North America. This is the study that's been done in North America. When I first began this work over 24 years ago, the question of what was the average attention span for an adult in North America, it was 22 seconds. A recent survey shows that it has now decreased down. It is now 8 seconds. Now that sounds pretty outrageous to me in one sense. When I first heard that even the 22 seconds, I didn't believe it. I thought that can't be. It can't be that we don't pay, that our attention span is only 22 seconds. But then I got to thinking, when I sit down to be quiet, to still myself, and it's not very long before a thought comes into my mind. And as soon, it's probably around 8 seconds right now that I'll sit there, and then a thought will come, and then another thought will come, and another thought will come. So this constant change of focus makes it more difficult to listen for any significant length of time. It's almost like we've rewired our brains to be more distracted by all that comes in. And we do have so much coming at us all the time now anyway. Immediately after we hear someone speak, we remember about half of what they've said. A few hours later, we remember only about 10 to 20%. And yet, less than 5% of us have ever concentrated on developing our skills in listening. So when people hear these numbers, they often say, that's so interesting. I know I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to say, but I don't think I've ever consciously thought about how I might listen. It's like listening has been lost art. So how do we define this art? What is the art of listening? My current definition is that it is the art of becoming a listening presence, a way of being in which stillness and attentiveness provide the space for people to speak authentically and know that they are being heard. It is from this place that we can listen across diverse backgrounds and cultures and religions and belief systems. It's about being a presence for understanding rather than judging. It's when we are open, curious, and attentive to others in this way, we discover a deeper, a sacred connection. We're in a relationship. I want to stop for a moment and see if you have any comments or questions that you might have now before we go on to the concepts about listening. Anything that you want to ask or anything that's come up for you? You can either do it in the chat or just put your hand up. We're all on one screen. I could see you. Anyone? Let's see anything. Okay, so we'll move on.
And Anne has a question.
Yeah.
Could you repeat your definition again?
I will actually put it in the chat box. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
And I will repeat it as well, but let me get back and find it here. Okay, here we go. Let me just copy it. maybe do this. Everyone. Let's see. Okay, should be there now. Do you see it? It's the art of becoming a listening presence, a way of being in which stillness and attentiveness provide the space for people to speak authentically and know they are being heard. It's from this place that we can listen across diverse backgrounds, cultures, religions, and belief systems. And it's about being a presence for understanding rather than judging. When we are open, curious, and attentive to others in this way, we discover a deeper sacred connection. We are in relationship. So that's it. All right. Anything else?
Okay, I was wondering what your thought on how important it is for the person speaking to receive non-verbal feedback, body language, and how feeling listened to is impacted by either receiving these nonverbal cues or not receiving these nonverbal cues. How does it change the quality of what the speaker is feeling?
That's a great question. And it depends what culture you're in. For one thing, you're talking about like body language and different cues like that. And it's the idea that the art of listening is that it's a way of being, and it's the beingness that provides that space in which people can be heard. And that it varies from person to person, from culture to culture, what cues might help in that. And as we go through with these concepts and then the practices, I think you'll see that I can't give you a straight answer to that question in one sense, because it's different for different people. And yet we will be, when we are able to understand and create that space for people, and the speaker will know that you're listening. And it'll be clear in one of the exercises that we'll do on the third week. We'll have an experiential exercise that will sort of help make that clearer. I'm sorry, it's not such a precise answer at this point, but I think it will be as we go through.
Can I
Yes,
say
Sandra.
something? I actually like the question that was posed, because on the other end, when someone is speaking to me, I tend to give nonverbal, have a nonverbal communication. I nod, I with my eyes, with my hands, and oftentimes I wonder and I worry if my nonverbal communication is not positive, that I should just look just stoic and not, be so receiving of the information. So just a thought I wanted to share.
Well, in one of the exercises that we do, sometimes this comes up, and it's like, and in our culture, people are uncomfortable if you just put on a stoic face because they think they're not listening to me. So, it's culturally, it's different in different cultures. I'll give you an example. A colleague of mine was in Australia, and she was talking about body language, and she was talking about the importance of eye contact and how that really people know they're being listened to when you make eye contact with them. And this, after the workshop that she did, one of the women there was an indigenous woman, an Aboriginal woman, and she came up to her and she said, my culture, we don't look at each other in the eyes. That doesn't matter to me. She said, would you like me to show you what it's like? And so my colleague said yes, and they sat down next to each other side by side, and the colleague spoke and that the other one, the Aboriginal woman, was listening to her, and that she never looked at her. And so there was no eye contact, and she didn't touch her. They were just sitting side by side. And when the woman had stopped, my colleague had stopped speaking, she said, I have never felt so completely listened to. So there was something about her way of being. That's what I'm getting to, this being a listening presence. There's something about way of being that offers that space that somebody can speak into and know that they're being heard. So it's a very interesting comments that you've made, though, to go on about this. So let's go into some of the concepts now about listening. So
I think Mackenzie has another question.
One other question?
Mackenzie, your comment?
Yeah, it's just a comment. I think it's also worth noting that sometimes people with certain disabilities, like autistic people, maybe have a tendency not to look people in the eyes, and it doesn't really mean they're not listening. It's just something to pay mind to.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Mackenzie. Okay, now we're going to go on. What are we looking for when we want to be listened to? This is where we're going to be talking about a concept of listening as an art. So what is this universal yearning that we are expressing? So we might get a sense of it when thinking about a time when someone was truly listening to you. So I invite you to do that now. Think about a time when you really felt you were being listened to. That whoever it was that was listening to you wasn't trying to figure out what they were going to say next or what they were going to do next or mentally reviewing a to-do list. They were simply there, present with you, listening. What was that like? How did you feel? If you want to put some words in the chat box, you can do that now. But words that often come up for people are words like understood, or refreshed, whole, connected, healed, validated, nurtured, cared for. It's a profound experience to be listened to this way. Calmed is one that's come up here on the screen. Understood, appreciated, validated. So it's really a profound experience. So when two people are deeply listening to one another, we sense that not only are we present to each other, we're present to something beyond our individual selves. Some might call it holy or sacred or spiritual. It's as though time stands still and we are simply being in the experience. And I think this is what we are longing for when we say we want others to listen to us. Martin Buber expresses it this way: when two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. So listening is more than hearing words. It's more than an act, more than something we do. It's an art. It's a way of being. It's an at oneness. We are at one with each other in these moments. We become that listening presence. And once we understand the concept of listening as an art, it shifts the frame from an act, something we do, to an art, something we be. We become that listening presence. We've neglected to value this art in our fast-paced culture, doing and overbooked schedules and the onslaught of email and social media and all the rest of it. But think about listening as an art, something we be. We become that listening presence. Next is listening as a choice. We choose whether or not we wish to listen to someone else. And most of the time, we're completely unaware of the fact that we're making that choice. Probably all had the experience of listening to someone and suddenly noticing that you haven't heard a word that the speaker said for at least a minute or so. Our attention was no longer with that other person. We unconsciously chosen not to listen. And we all know too what it's like when we are speaking and the other person says out. They're physically present and it looks like they're listening, but they're not with us. We just sense that they're no longer listening. We have that sense of They're not present with us. That space is not there for us in which to speak. Sometimes it's easier to notice conscious choices. If we don't want to hear what someone is saying, we can tune them out in an instant. Sometimes we stop listening because we're uncomfortable or not interested in the topic. Sometimes we know that we should listen, but that if we really listen, we might have to change the way we think about something or the way we lead our lives, and we're just not quite ready or willing to do that at this point. Sometimes we choose not to listen because we have something going on in our own lives that is so profound or overwhelming that we truly cannot listen to anyone else. We are simply not able to handle any additional input. We don't have the bandwidth. Learning that we have a choice to listen or to not listen is a very profound insight. There's a power connected to the realization that it's okay to make the choice either way. It's fine to let people know when we are not able to listen to them, whether it's a matter of our time, our schedule, or a personal concern, or something else that gets in the way of giving another our full attention. Most people would rather have us listen to them authentically with our full attention than be the recipient of partial listening. There's something called CPA, the syndrome called CPA, continuous partial attention. It seems like we're continuously paying partial attention to everything, and we're not paying complete full attention to anything. Kind of a syndrome in our culture. Listening is not a passive activity. It's not simply being quiet or even hearing the words. It takes energy to listen. And once we become aware of listening as a choice, we'll notice that we have many opportunities to practice choosing in our daily lives. This awakening can be life-changing as we discover how much better we listen when we know that we have chosen to listen, and how much less stress we have when we know that we have consciously chosen not to listen. The last concept for context is that listening is a gift. Listening to another with rapt attention is a gift beyond measure. Remember what it felt like when you were thinking of that person who was really fully listening to you. It can be a transformative experience. Both the listener and the speaker expand their sense of connection and closeness. We lose track of time and space. We're simply being in the experience. Artists call this aesthetic rapture. Mystics say it's ecstasy. If you're an athlete, you might call it being in the zone. Or jazz musician, you might say it's when you're in the groove. These are the conversations that we treasure in our hearts. I think many of us also had the experience of someone thanking us for all of the help we gave them at a particular time in their lives. And we wonder what they're talking about because we just remember not saying much or doing anything, just being there. And what we did was we simply gave them the gift of our listening. We were being a listening presence with them. So once we think about listening as a gift that we may either give or receive, it kind of shines a light on a value of listening, a new light on the value of listening. This understanding gives us permission to slow down and savor the conversation by either opening up to receive the gift or extending the hospitality of giving the gift of listening. There's a Cuban proverb that says, listening looks easy, but it's not simple. Every head is a world. And what I've discovered about listening over these past few years is that the work that I do is about teaching people how to prepare to listen, how to become that listening presence. We're very familiar with classes on preparing to speak, public speaking, but how many of you have taken a class on preparing to listen? Maybe public listening. I don't think there is such a thing. But just as we take time to write and practice and polish a speech when we're preparing to talk, I'm suggesting that there is value in taking time to practice preparing to listen. So one of the keys to developing the capacity to listen more deeply is this daily practice. Most of us know that if we want to excel at anything, we want to be good at anything, we practice. Think of all the time that musicians or athletes or dancers spend practicing or training. Dancers refer to the outcome of this practice as muscle memory. So daily practice anchors the movements in the muscles. So when it's time for the performance, the dancer no longer has to think about each individual move. Rather, the muscles remember what to do. And we can develop similar memory for listening. It is in the daily practice, the spiritual discipline, that we prepare ourselves to listen. Then, when we need to listen deeply, we'll be able to focus on the speaker, remaining fully present and aware of what they are saying and who they are being. We can receive their communication with total openness, even if we hold the opposite point of view. Becoming a listening presence is critical to learning how to understand the other. We become a compassionate listening presence, something that we want to focus on as a beloved community. So listening is half of all communication. It is often the forgotten part of presentations and conversations. And understanding that listening is an art and a choice and a gift changes our perception and allows us to consciously value the time we spend in conversation. It gives us a frame within which to develop our skills. So we're going to move into breakout sessions in just a moment. And I just want to see if there are any questions or anything that you want to say before we go into those breakout rooms and have a conversation. Anything? Any questions, any comments?
Sorry, I have another question. I was waiting. What is the role of feedback and we were talking about nonverbal. What is the role of obviously you've heard me, that kind of feedback?
Well, how does the person know that they've been heard?
Well, if yes, and the idea that what you've just said back to me when it finally was time to speak was exactly what I was saying or exactly what I was trying to say.
I think that sometimes no words are necessary. Sometimes it's just your presence is all that's needed. Sometimes it's a matter of just saying, just validating the person for what they just said, validating not validating them, but validating what they said, so they know that you heard what they said.
Okay.
That kind of thing. Okay, we're going to set up for the breakout rooms now. We'll have 20 minutes in the breakout rooms. We can set that up. And we're going to be either 4 or 5 people, and each person will have a few minutes to respond to the questions, and I'll put the questions in the chat. And just a brief reminder of the norms that we use in summer house church conversations might be helpful here too. That we listen and speak with respect, compassion, and curiosity. Only one person speaks at a time without interruption or comments. And speaking for yourself and from your own experience. That we hold these stories or personal experiences of confidentiality, and that we be willing to discover and explore, look for something new. Those are kinds of our norms that we set up for Summer House Church, and I think they'd be good for us to keep in mind as we get into our breakout rooms. Just trying to put this in the chat room right now. I can't get down to the end of chat. Does anybody know why I can't do that? Let me get this in here. Here we go. Let's see. Has it shown up? Do you see it? Does anybody see it? Because it starts with what about the topic?
Don't see the questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay, I don't know why they didn't show up. Well, the question, let me put the questions then on let me share a screen and I'll put them on the questions so you can at least see what they are before we go into this. Let's see if we can, see if it works. Okay, let me get down to the questions. Here, these are the questions for tonight. Can you see them now?
Mhm.
What about the topic of this series caught your attention? In other words, why did you decide to come? Why did you decide to attend? What has been stirred up in you by what you've heard so far? What surprised you? And what has opened up for you about the value of listening? We're going to take 20 minutes to do that. And when you get in your groups, you might want to start by introducing yourself, responding. You could, the first person might be the person whose name is closest to the beginning of the alphabet, whose first name is closest to the beginning. And we'll give you a 5-minute notice. And then if you have any questions, you can come to the main room. I'll be in the main room and then you can go back. So this is what we will be doing. And if anybody else could copy these questions from the slide and put them in the chat, since I don't seem to have that capacity for some reason, that would be great.
So I'm setting up the breakout rooms. There'll be groups of 4 or 3 because we have an uneven number. Accept the invitation. Kay, you'll be in a group, right? You could.
No, I will not be in a group.
Okay, let me see how to get you out of a room.
I want to be in the main room.
Yeah, but I don't know how to put you in the main room.
Oh, well, I can get myself out of a group. If you put me in a group, I just take myself out.
Great. And then in 5 minutes, we'll send you a warning.
5 minutes before the end of the 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay. So accept the invitation, please.
We all back? Welcome back. What was that like? What was said that wants to be shared with the whole group? Is there anything that was shared in your small group that would like to be shared with the whole group? Anybody?
A question we spent some time with was it was Sandra's question of like, what do you do if you're talking with someone and you can tell they just aren't listening to you? and yet to say to them, you aren't listening to me, can be felt as confrontational.
Yes, exactly.
And yet we talked about, so do you just go silent? Do you try to invite them to talk and model listening, hoping they might feel the difference? But that was something that we were hoping to learn more.
Yeah. I think more will be revealed as we go along. And sometimes it's just that people just have, there's something that came into my mind and it went out again. Oh my gosh, it will come back. Because I had a response to what you just said and now I lost it. See if it'll come back to me. No, it's not there right now. Okay, it'll come back. But it's oh, I know what it was. It's like you can only change the way you listen. You can't change the way somebody else listens. It's just like people will listen how they listen. There's nothing you can do to change their listening. However, what you just said was by modeling your own listening, sometimes that is what helps people to start listening more themselves as well. But there's a great story by Ursula. No, can't remember her name. Anyway, she's an author, and she had a father that never listened to her. He talked a lot. He was a raconteur, and he just never listened to her very much. And unfortunately, that was the way their relationship lasted his whole life. And then after he died, a few months after he died, one of his friends called her and said, your dad was just this amazing man, and he told all these stories. And he said, but I know you didn't have a very good relationship with him. And she said, no, I didn't. And he said, well, I'd like to talk to you about that. So they ended up going to a cabin that family cabin that they'd been to many years ago. And they got out there and they spent time together. And he was trying to tell her about this situation. And he just kept talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And 2 or 3 days later, he finally said to her, "And how are things with you?" So that was her door. It opened her door, the window that she could walk into and say, "Well, now that's interesting. It took you 2.5 days before you asked me how I was doing." So, that's the opposite of what you were saying, but it's still the idea is that sometimes you just have to wait, and then somebody else's listing can change over time. Okay, I think we're about ready to finish for tonight. You'll receive an email, God willing, with the handouts for tonight. And one of the first things in the handout will be some questions to reflect on over this next week, as well as a quote to ponder. And then there will be a summary of what we talked about tonight in your handout. And the session's been recorded, and that will be posted tomorrow, I believe, along with our quote of the day. And so you'll have that. And if you want to continue these conversations with people that were in your small circle, you're welcome to do that. But we also have 2 opportunities this week if you want to continue the conversation. There will be one opportunity tomorrow for a brown bag lunch at the Prince Hum's home, 11:30. Bring a brown bag lunch and you can have a conversation. And then on Tuesday afternoon at 2 p.m. at the Clemensons, at Diane Clemenson's home, raise your hand, Diane. There will be an opportunity again to have a conversation in the afternoon. So as we close off this tonight, I'm inviting each of you to think of one word that describes what you will take away with you from having participated in tonight's conversation. Just think for a moment, what's one word that you might say represents something that you will take away with you from having been here tonight, having this conversation, and write it in chat, please.
Mhm.
Alexa, maybe we'll come next time. We'll come early. And we're glad you're here now. Okay, or you can unmute yourself and just say the word too. Choice, challenge, what else? Gift, focus. Whatever word it is for you, just remember that listening is an art and a choice and a gift, and that's the main topic of today, as well as that it takes practice. And we're going to be talking about next 3 weeks, we'll be talking about 3 different practices that we can take on a regular basis that will give us that muscle memory, so that when we want to have deeper intentional conversations, that we will have that muscle memory of how to be fully present, so that we can have that sense of being at one with those people that we really want to listen to. And I also invite you, one other thing is that tomorrow evening there will be a Taizé service on Zoom, and I invite you to do that because that really relates to our topic for next week as well. Part of our topic next week will be cultivating silence, and Taizé is part of that. So I encourage you to come tomorrow. It's at 7, I believe, tomorrow night on Taizé. And so finally, I'm just going to extinguish the light from this candle as the last thing that we do for today. And remind you to take the light with you when you leave here and go out into the world, that you have that light with you at all times. So thank you for your listening.
Thank you.
Next week, we will be talking about listening for God, cultivating silence.
Okay. Thank you.